a giant lawsuit by the Attorney General or something. And so the sponsor kind of speaking on both sides of their mouth saying platforms are only motivated by their business self-interest, so that's why you have to do this. And then they say, oh, but it's not a free speech problem. Platforms aren't going to overcensor content, even though their business interests will lead to overcensoring. Not that any of these people are predicting the truth about this bill from the get-go.
Right, and making this bill and obviously get our faith is cracking down on big tech, but it's not cracking down on big tech, it's cracking down on the speech of users. Because big tech, as you said, they don't really care that much about free speech. I visited another video on this law in Texas where it said that would censor content by written online. Like platforms are like, fine, we'll go along with it, we'll censor it nationwide. We have as well, just to be compliant, like you said, and not jeopardize our business. And so there's not really any sort of advocacy looking out for users in this situation.
Well, Fire is looking out for users.
Other than Fire, our one savior here. There are some organizations.
There aren't any companies, though.
There aren't any companies.
That's for sure.
I want to just run through a few other ways this bill is harmful. So mention the duty of care. The duty of care is problematic. There's no science behind Chris's primary claims. And there's this idea of the carve-outs. And they say that carve-outs fix this first major problem. They even say, I guess, in the text of the bill that it's not a free speech issue. Don't look here. The bill's not language that viewpoints are protected. So can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, so first of all, that's entirely offensive because the sponsors know damn well what the operation of the duty of care and Western statute is. They know platforms are going to do it under their access for business purposes. They're saying, oh, speech is protected and you don't have to take it down or censor it, knowing that platforms are going to do that because it's in their best interest. It is entirely disingenuous. So some of the other ways, you have the default settings. So the minors have to have the most restrictive settings enabled by default. Of course, platforms have no way of really knowing which user is a minor or not unless they do what? Age verification, which is a huge security and privacy nightmare, not to mention a minor free speech concern. But say platforms say we're not going to do that, we're going to do everyone's going to have those most restrictive default settings and platforms don't get in trouble. It might not seem like a big deal, but first of all, anyone who's trying to play the social media platform settings know how much pain it is to actually find anything. And second of all, there are a lot of these bills in the states, and we're not being surprised to see it introduced to COSA at some point, that talk about how parents have to provide consent if a minor wants to change. I think right now COSA says that users under 13 have to provide consent, but most platforms don't allow users under 13 on the platform anyway because of Pop-Up, which is a entirely other barrel of evil monkeys. So kids are going to be by default, or potentially everyone by default is going to be used to contact other people or posting publicly, things like that. Or platforms can infringe on all of our rights by providing age verification. COSA also gives the FTC power to issue guidance regarding best practices in providing minors and parents with the most protective level of control over safety and provide additional tools that allow parents to address the harms to minors that it specifies. And that gives the FTC a whole lot of power over what people get to see, read, and hear on social media. Because in practice, the FTC is out and saying this is how we best protect children. But first of all, it's nowhere near the FTC's zone of expertise whatsoever. The FTC basically gets to be the internet censor. And wouldn't you know it, Andrew Ferguson, the chair of the FTC, is currently engaged in this fishing expedition. He asked for public comment regarding social media quote-unquote censorship by platforms. Says, basically you give a pretext to find some kind of competition claim where it really is a speech issue. And you can look at the past 100 days of the Trump administration and think, oh, Andrew Ferguson's not going to use this to go after content he doesn't like on the internet, then I just don't know what to tell you. It's not even a question, it's not even almost certainly, it is certainly going down.
I think that also the Heritage Foundation, which is the Protective Project 25, said outright, this was reportedly Protectorate, well, we will use COSA to censor content about these as other things.
They have told us who they are, we should believe it.
And yet, the Democrats are really helping to push this forward, and sugars and because now, I guess I'm wondering, why is this such a bipartisan bill when we know that the right has explicitly said we will weaponize this law in the worst way that you can have?
So first of all, there's a politics issue that's very hard to say I oppose something when it's quote-unquote for children. There's a reason why people do that because it's politically costly to say no, this isn't the right way to do it. But I think more fundamentally, I think that some people are deluded into thinking, oh, either no, that could never happen, they'll be brazen enough to do that, or the courts will sort it all out and they'll say that the government can't do this. To which I say, first of all, again, have you been alive for the past 100 days? You mustn't, because there isn't any age to be upset. Second of all, if you don't think anyone's brazen enough to do that, look at the entire history of the United States. Third, maybe the courts will say you can't do that. But two problems with that. First of all, that means that people will have had to go through however long it takes for that case to wind through the system, during which time the platform is going to continue doing all of these things because they want to cover their rights. So you have that period that takes for litigation to unwind where the censorship is ongoing. And second of all, you trust that the Trump administration is going to listen to the courts. This is handing a loaded gun to someone who says, I want to commit murder. And they think, oh, they just said that. Just know you're actually going to do it. So to give you the short answer, I have no idea what's going on here. It's so nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense. It is fundamentally terrible. I
think also we forget how vast the internet is. And I mean, this has come up actually also in discussions in Section 230. But when we think of social media, we think of communication platforms. We think of Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and new ones. And the internet is massive. And there are so many niche communities, especially recently as we've seen through the rise of alternative platforms to challenge this duopoly that we have with people. How would COSA affect that? Because I'm thinking of like these small forums, for instance, providing positivity or it's help actually. It seems like they would be targeted in this situation as well.
Yeah, there was a version, the House version last year tried to do a thing where that platform like to large platforms, that's not an interest type. This time around, it creates compliance costs and risks. And like I said, as with Section 230, big platforms would live without it. Small platforms would get absolutely demolished with potential liability. This creates a lot of liability. You think of some of the niche communities that might be around this favorite content, say a message board for LGBT people. If you don't think that those are big enough for people to go after, well, again, I'm not a bridge to something broken. But they're going to go after because they said they're going to go after. And it's going to probably cause a bunch of sites to get shut down.
I think that LGBTQ thing is so important and mental health stuff. There's basically no way to host a community or a forum or support group online talking about stuff without it being targeted by COSA. When you look at what the government considers harmful to children, it's information about LGBT rights, as Marcia Blackburn said just last year about COSA, right? We need a law to eradicate the transgender from the internet forever. She makes it very But there's no way to talk about the top. If your whole thing is to stop any sort of content that mental health, that includes support groups that actually help people with mental health. There's sort of talk about some of these thorny issues. There's sort of agreed upon ways also to handle some of that stuff. So it seems like the effects would be so wide-reaching in ways that people aren't even considering. Like their hatred of Meta and Google is so strong that they're not even thinking about the rest of the internet, which is vast.
Two things to that. First of all, yes, it's so broad and vague that it can transmogrify into basically whatever the government wants to be. But second of all, related but also unrelated, if people say are going to Meta for information about, say they want to be anorexic, they're looking for pro-anorexic content. Included in the content they find is going to be anti-eating disorder content because the people who combat eating disorders specifically try to infiltrate and use hashtags to try to pull people away. In addition, Facebook is probably going to say, hey, if you're looking at harmful content, you should think twice about this and do what they alleged conventions. If Facebook is now saying, no, we're just going to block all that content, what are people going to do? They're going to go to Google and search for it, and they're going to find a website that doesn't do that. And they're much more likely to find very harmful content there. So pushing kids into into the darker corners of the, as you said, very large internet, where if you think Facebook is doing a bad job, I promise you, there are sites that are doing a worse job.
And they're not necessarily like social networks, but just sort of like these websites that provide very dangerous information. You can be radicalized by them. I mean, I spent a lot of time on GeoCities when I was younger, and all the weird like circles back then. That was like,
What time to be alive?
I know, but it was such a different internet. But that whole like structure sources, eating disorder problem, in my opinion, is so much bigger than social media. This is a society-wide issue, and I feel like that's the problem with all of these things. Like,
We're trying to take shortcuts.
yes, they want to blame social media for these much bigger systemic issues without ever addressing the bigger systemic issues in society, because these issues existed long before social media ever did.
The problem is humans, it's not social media.
Right, and ultimately, the internet just is a connector of humans, right? And that seems to be what they want to target.
I think talking to each other less is the thing that we need to do, right?
Which is ironically, I think, what makes it lead to. I think it's as well, like, it's stigmatizing communication, it's telling kids, like, you're addicted to communicating with friends. At a time when they're also doing all this work about the loneliness epidemic and how lonely children are, kids are trying to, yeah, kids are trying to connect online. I guess, what would you say to people that are like, well, this is all bad. Hoover and all the crazy conspiracy theories about meta, people, whatever, and you're like, well, these algorithms are fundamentally evil and bad, and we must use something. Again, this law is perfect, but, you know, we've got to protect the kids somehow.
Well, I'd say first of all is that the algorithms are generally more vanilla than anything. It shows us what it takes we want to see based on what we have seen. But more fundamentally, I would say that people thought television was different. People thought radio was different. People thought comic books were different. People thought video games were different. It always seems like it's different and scarier, but it's not. When my parents were growing up, people were freaking out about the effects of the TV in the household. You watch kids' brains just all day from YouTube and whatever. By the time I was born, America had figured out a way to integrate television into the home in a way that is more or less vitiated the concerns that people previously had. We are in the period right now where we are still integrating social media into our lives. In a generation, we will look back and this will all seem very, very stupid. Just like it seems stupid that people try to talk about comic books and video games. Right? We're going to look back and say, oh, well, now we know how to use this in a way that causes fewer problems. Right there, we're in the process of getting there. Don't screw it up the rest of us.
You're more optimistic than me already.
I have to. Otherwise, what do I have?
I know, I guess, like, you know, I've done much reporting on like these past one parents, and there was so much harm. I mean, the comic book comparison is a good one, right? They passed actual laws, right, against comic books. Of course, one of the biggest comic book manufacturers out of business. These platforms actually a huge range of diverse comic books that had LGBTQ characters and things like that. So I worry that, and same with the video game period online, as we like, the video game industry school here, you know, like, it cut off a lot of kids from community and connection.
Well, that's why I think the response has to be, don't pass these laws. If we don't pass these laws, we will figure this out in a generation, maybe less. But if we do, we're going to experience the same harms that we experience in the other volcanoes all over again, and we will have done it to ourselves.
And we'll have real systemic harm. I mean, it really caused practical harm. We know too that there's obviously saying that cannot kids that have smartphones to directly because they're in communication with their friends. They're able to connect with their friends. And it's harder and harder for kids to find that connection. So I just hate to see it stigmatized in that way. Also, Ari, well, thank you so much for your time. Where can people continue to follow you more?
You can find me at aricone on Twitter, aricone.com on Blue Sky. You can follow the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, Fire at thefire.org, and the Fire on Twitter. Yeah, because of the main places.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, my pleasure.
All right, that's it for this week's episode of Free Speech Friday. I'd like to hear what you guys think about COSA. If you have any other questions about this law, I want to hear them. I'm going to be responding and providing more information also in the description to the pieces on Factor that we outline how dangerous this piece of legislation is. If you like this episode, please subscribe to my technical online companies that are usermag.co. That's usermag.co. It's here online culture news that covers a lot of free speech issues and just broader online culture, tech news, and more. So thanks for subscribing, and see you next week.
The internet is full of ads. You shouldn't click on it. So we're clicking on them to see where it takes us.
That is actually insanely creepy. Even you, let's click on that.
Yeah, for sure. But don't worry about secondary laptops or not getting weird viruses. We have the software inside. Obviously, any like connectivity thing that's happening on the computer. Oh,
Is that something?
oh yeah, is that Watchmen? Oh, wait, what's happening? Oh,
Oh, we can get a 9-centimeter launcher. Ah, a success story.
these two Dutch people, Frans and Maureen, they're 35, 28, they live down to them. And this is their real story that they accepted. My was 13 centimeters and I finished in just a few minutes. Ours was inactive for about a year, and we knew our relationship was not going to last. Some guy said that Beetle top is top before saved their relationship. We decided, you know, what do we have to do?
But like, can you actually buy it? Because I'm not.
Well, let's first see what this really real sexuologist and specialist said. Look at him.
I trust him.
ED, erectile dysfunction, is one of the main relationship and wedding enders.
I mean, it sounded like very malpractice.
I don't know, right? Sorry. Oh, he's Dr. Xavier Weiser.
You know what?
Can we find him?
I'll grab the jackson out.
Is he real?
There's an Instagram post.
Ah, is it? Yeah.
But it is the name of an actual
What is
doctor.
he a sexuologist for between that last?
Passionate about skin health, anti-aging, and hormone
So
balance.
he's the girl. Oh, have you noticed HTTP as they just put in the URL doesn't it seem like it's a safe connection?
Oh.
Click here for access to the online store of Girl Time. I've got a whole thing on go. Bill, of course.
Asking on TV.
Wait, I'm sorry. Get me out here every night. Hey, they have terms of use. It's in French. With their company registration, it's so stupid.
Oh, I love that. Hey, what's the phone number there? 7755.
Just call them.
Hello, you have reached your factory insurance. Our customer care doesn't produce account.
No, what is Our Factory? Our Factory Trustpilot. And there's reviews that are people saying, hey, I know this treatment doesn't work for everybody, but it's for me.